The CDF unit monitors project costs and implementation. So if you have questions about how the CDF are run in your community, contact them. To ensure no one project or community gets all the funds, there are 6 project categories with spending limits for each. There must be no less than 5 and no more than 20 projects each year. To learn more, visit jampja.org to view your MP's CDF info and tell them how this fund has impacted you. If you don't see your MP's CDF reports, then put them under little pressure, man. Call, tweet, email. Ask them when they'll submit it and when is the next CDF meeting. Change is possible. It's already happening. What we need is you. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, funded by the European Union and the Inter-American Development Bank in partnership with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica.
Jamaica, I can help you protect our citizens.
Jamaica Eye will play a part in increasing your public safety.
Jamaica Eye is part of an island-wide network of camera surveillance systems designed to increase the safety of you, our citizens. If you have a camera system outside your home or office facing a public space, log on to jamaicaeye.gov.jm today. Jamaica Eye, we're all connected. The Ministry of National Security, creating a safer and prosperous Jamaica.
The following is brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
To fight crime and violence in your country, your government has invested over $9.7 billion into national security systems. This includes the construction and renovation of dozens of police stations, the acquisition of critical security equipment such as patrol vessels and police vehicles, the recruitment and training of more police officers, and the build-out of the Jamaica Defense Force. Your government is investing in your safety. We are building Jamaica.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
The following is brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Jamaica is changing right before our very eyes. Across the island, billions are being invested into our road networks, from farm and community roads to major roads and highways. Dozens of communities across the length and breadth of Jamaica are receiving access to reliable potable water for the very first time. And thousands of Jamaicans have become homeowners thanks to the historic shifts in policies of the National Housing Trust, making it easier for Jamaicans to receive funding. Not to mention the record number of houses being built. Never dreamed you would own a home? No matter your circumstance, home ownership is possible for you, thanks to the government's new social housing program specially designed to meet the needs of poor Jamaicans at no cost to them. We are building Jamaica.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Send the something and come back. Back to sender! God, I thank you so much.
Miracles await and miracles abound. Tune in every Sunday at 7 a.m. for your share of the Miracle Revival Hour with Reverend Dr. Blair. Come for the word, stay for the worship. Right here on PBCJ.
Miracle worker, work one for me.
Most Jamaicans will tell you corruption in politics is deep-rooted, and I just saw it said, and nothing can do about that. But actually, there is, and another 152 countries are doing it. It's called asset declaration, and it works best where citizens themselves understand it and help to ensure the law is enforced. Corruption happens when public officials abuse their power to benefit themselves, family, or associates. Jamaica's Integrity Commission Act was designed to prevent corruption, and here are 5 things you should know. 1. Under this law, every year MPs and senators must report what they earn, own, and owe, and if they don't, they'll be sanctioned. 2. Their report must include the same kind of information for their wife or husband and children. 3. If they get a gift worth more than $100,000 from anyone who's not family, they must declare it. 4. A summary of the declarations of our Prime Minister and opposition leader must be published where the public can read it. 5. Parliamentarians can now be prosecuted by the Integrity Commission. They can be fined up to $2 million or serve up to 2 years in prison if they don't file their declaration or if they give false information, and $500,000 for not filing on time or ignoring requests for information. Unfortunately, our parliamentarians made changes that prevent the public from knowing when they've broken the law or when they're being investigated. We really need to change that. Visit jampja.org to find out more about the act and to track if your MP is obeying this law. If they're not, JAMP's MP Tracker will help you write, tweet, or call your MP. Ask them, you submit your declaration yet? The Integrity Commission clear you? Let's help the Parliament stay honest. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, funded by the European Union and the Inter-American Development Bank in partnership with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica.
The following is brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Your government is empowering you through education, training, and development. That is why we have removed all fees for every Jamaican accessing training through the Heart NSTA Trust. So, whatever you desire training in, food and hospitality, beauty and cosmetology, housekeeping and hotel management, welding, carpentry, masonry, or any of the dozens of programs Heart offers, you can enroll completely free and change your life. We are building Jamaica.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
What can a little germs do?
Pink eye running belly, even flu. Germs can make them happen to you.
Put germs on our manners with these. Cover your mouth when you cough and sneeze. Always wash your hand with water and soap. Keep dirty hands from your eyes and your nose and your mouth. You don't want to be sick, take care. Practice every day, no germs around here. A message from the Ministry of Health.
Motorists, certificates of fitness are now digital. Here's how it works. First, make your payment at TAJ inline or online. Then, take your receipt along with your vehicle to an Island Traffic Authority service hub for physical inspection. A valid email address is required to receive your digital fitness. Once the inspection is complete, your certificate number will be sent directly to your email. To access your digital certificate, visit cgds.gov.jm/fitness, enter your certificate number and the chassis number, and view your certificate online. New validity periods are here. New vehicles, 5 years. Vehicles 10 years or less, 3 years. And those older than 10, 1 year. No more paper certificates. Just secure, digital access, anytime, anywhere. For more information, connect with us via email at info@ita.gov.jm or on social media at Island Traffic Authority.
Hey, I'm Abijah, the Roots Man. Today, I want to talk to you about something powerful. Peace. Peace isn't just the absence of conflict. It's about kindness, understanding, and respect. It starts with us. Every choice we make can build bridges or burn them. Let's choose peace in our words, our action, and our hearts. Peace begins with you. Together, we can create a brighter and safer future for everyone. Join me. Let's be that change we want to see.
Every year, the Jamaican Parliament approves billions of our taxes to be spent on goods and services provided by the private sector. Everything from pens to power plants, cleaning services to construction are obtained through a process called public procurement. But who funds this process? Citizens do. And we want our taxes to be spent wisely. When we talk about public procurement, there's a critical concept called value for money. We hear it in the Parliament all the time, but what does it really mean? Some think value for money means choosing the cheapest option, but it's more than that. For example, a community needs a new bridge, and the government receives bids from 3 companies. Company A offers to build it for $10 million in 18 months with a 50-year lifespan. Company B wants $12 million to finish in 12 months with a 75-year lifespan. Company C asks for $8 million, needs 24 months with a 25-year lifespan. company B actually offers the best value for money? To determine that, we look for 4 crucial factors: economy, efficiency, effectiveness, and equity. Let's explore what each means. For economy, we must look beyond the upfront price and consider the full lifetime costs to maintain the bridge. Cheaper options could lead to frequent and expensive repairs. We get efficiency if the bridge is built within budget and on time, with no waste of materials. To achieve this, we need the best team, and clear criteria helps the government to pick the best proposal. Effectiveness looks at whether the government achieves its goal. This could require a community needs assessment to ensure the bridge will reduce transport costs and travel time, withstand the annual flooding with little disturbance to plant and animal life. Finally, equity. This is about fairness, satisfying the different needs of the community. The bridge design considers not just cars and pedestrians, but is sensitive to the needs of the elderly, the disabled community, and children. So when we're talking about value for money, don't just ask how much it did cost. Ask, what are we truly getting for our money? The cheapest option today can become the most expensive mistake tomorrow. So from now on, let's ask the right questions for Jamaica land we love.
Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy holy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the king, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Christ Jesus, O Lord. Amen.
This meeting of the Honorable Senate for June 26, 2026 is called to order. I welcome all of you here this morning, and to those who are joining online, of which I know there are quite a few. We're joined this morning by 4 members of the G2K and Young Jamaica, the youth arm of the Jamaica Labour Party, most of whom are just completing university studies. So welcome to the Parliament this morning. One of them was telling me that one of her favorite professors is in fact a member of the Senate. So spoke very highly of you, madam. No. Spoke very highly of our professor. Before we begin the business of the day, Senator Scott Motley has asked to join online. I believe, Mr. Brown, there are some technical issues outstanding, or you're good? Oh, she's on. Okay, so permission for Senator Scott Marty to join in favor? Good, thank you very much. Welcome, Senator Scott Motley. Always a pleasure to see you. Before we begin the business further, just bring to the attention of the Senate the passing of former Senator and former President Ozzie Harding, who transited yesterday. It is my intention to have a particular moment set aside in the future when appropriate tributes can be paid to Senator Harding. I know that a number of our members would have wanted to prepare, including Scott Motley and the leader of government business who is away out of the jurisdiction. So in short order, we'll have the relevant tributes, but I just bring it to your attention this morning. I think that more or less covers our business part of the day. Let me just see what this is here. Is hieroglyphics this? Okay. And I'm also to apologize because the sign interpreter is a bit delayed this morning. And it is something that I know the clerk is looking at because we need to make some changes in relation to that as to how it is we go about that aspect of the business. So, yes. Sorry, just 1 minute, Senator Morris. And I know that a number of you are seated in seats other than your own, so I'm going to just give a blanket permission for everyone to speak from a seat other than their own, starting with Senator Morris, who is acting leader of opposition business today. Yeah, but you know what them say already, brethren, so.
Yes, Mr. President, you just mentioned the situation with the sign language interpreter, and I just want to highlight something that has been a concern to me, because in terms of both national and international standards, we're not supposed to have one person signing for any extended period. And this is the third time for the year that I'm taking note that the interpreter is not available. And we have to make sure that we move speedily to get an additional sign language interpreter. There should be at least 2 persons signing, and no one person is to sign beyond 1 hour at a time. You know, so that is something that we have to seriously look at and correct expeditiously. Thank you, Mr. Chair. President.
Yes, thank you very much, Senator Morris. As I indicated, the issue is receiving active attention of the clerk, and we did note that you had brought this to our attention before, and even as you were indicating that we perhaps are ahead of the game in relation to a number of other institutions and parliaments in the Commonwealth, we do need to make some improvement in it. And as I said, the matter is under the active consideration of the clerk, and we would not at all have any difficulty with you seeking some discussion with the clerk. In fact, I will direct that the clerk bring you up to speed in relation to what is presently taking place so we can move forward. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate are the following: annual report and audited financial statements of the Sugar Industrial Authority for the year ended October 31, 2020, and its related ministry paper number 35 of 2026 titled Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Sugar Industrial Authority for the crop year 2019-2020. Financial statements of the Consolidated Fund for the year ended March 31, 2026, and its related ministry paper number 36 of 2026, titled Financial Statements of the Consolidated Fund for the year ended March 31, 2026. Annual Report of the Tourism Product Development Company Limited for the financial year 2023-2024. Annual Report of the Board of Supervision for the fiscal years 2014-2015, 2015-2016, 2016-2017, and 2017-2018 for the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development. The Insurance Amendment of 20th Schedule Number 2 Regulations 2026 under the Insurance Act. Auditor General Department's Performance Audit Report, National Water Commission, Effectiveness of Managing Capital Projects, Assessing Budget Credibility at the Entity Level. Integrity Commission's Investigation Report into concerns that the following officers employed to the Information and Communication Technology Authority failed to file their statutory declaration with the Commission for the year 2023 contrary to law and their indicative ruling. Mr. Walt Brown, a Department Head, Data Management, and Mr. Mark Murray, a Senior Programmer Analyst. Integrity Commission's Investigation Report into concerns that Ms. Dana Ashpole, a Chief Executive Officer, formerly employed to the Cannabis Licensing Authority, failed to file her statutory declaration with the Commission for the year 2023 contrary to law and its indicative ruling. Integrity Commission's Investigation Report into concerns that Dr. Andrew Wheatley, Member of Parliament, for the years 2010 to 2022, owns or acquired assets disproportionate to his lawful earnings, made false statements in his statutory declarations, and failed to provide information requested from him by the Director of Information and Complaints contrary to law and its indicative ruling. Under the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017, the Law Reforms Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Extension of Period of Operation Orders 2026, and their resolutions in respect of 1. The Augustown Zone, 2. The Norwood Community in the Parish of St. James Zone, 3. The Greenwich Town Zone, 4. The Mount Salem Community and Environs in the Parish of St. James Zone, 5. The Denham Town Community Zone, 6. The Savannah Lamar Zone, and 7. The Parade Garden Zone. Ministry Papers numbered 37 to 43 of 2026, titled The Law Reform, Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Social Interventions Update, December 1, 2025 to May 31, 2026, in respect of 1. The Augustown Zone dated June 3, 2026, 2. The Norwood Community Zone dated June 3, 2026, 3. The Greenwich Town Zone dated June 3, 2026, 4. The Mount Salem Community Zone dated June 5, 2026, 5. The Denham Town Community Zone dated June 3, 2026, 6. The Savannah Lamar Zone dated June 5, 2026, and 7. The Parade Garden Zone dated June 3, 2026. The Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Amendment Order 2026 and its resolution, and the National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2026 and its resolution under the Minimum Wage Act. Auditor General's Department certified appropriation accounts under Head 17000 for the Ministry of Tourism 2018-2019. Head 26059 for the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency for the year 2022-2023. The Income Tax Period of Disaster Relief Payments Hurricane Melissa Notice 2026 under the Income Tax Act. By way of information, the report of the Standing Finance Committee of the whole House of Representatives, consisting of all members of the House, on the Bank of Jamaica Monetary Policy Statement for the 6 month ended March 2026 and quarterly monetary policy reports dated February 24, 2026 and May 26, 2026. And finally, the report of the Public Accounts Committee of the House of Representatives on its examination of ministries, departments, agencies during the period September 2025 to February 2026. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honourable House.
There seems to be 4 reports from the Integrity Commission. 3 deal with, and I use the term, public officers, and 1 a political member. Would the Parliament be able to tell us how many reports from the Integrity Commission deals with non-political directorate versus those who deal with political directorate? No, today
of the 4?
Only one.
Yeah.
Political directorate. It seems that there are 3 for quote-unquote public officers, and I use public officers in a broad sense. What I'm wondering is if for the last 3 years we could get a sense of how many of the IC reports deal with public officers versus those with the political directorate.
Address that to the Integrity Commission.
You want me to talk to them about it?
I'm saying if you want that information, ask the Integrity
But
Commission.
because they give it to the Parliament, I don't want to mix up.
Or you suppose you can get it online?
All right.
Okay. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives to the Honourable Senate. I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 10th day of June 2026, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Civil Aviation Act was passed with 6 amendments. Most Honourable Juliet Holness, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Minister.
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the bill.
A bill shortly entitled the Civil Aviation Amendment Act 2026 read a first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill. And Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of the bill and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Thank you very much, Minister. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the Pension Superannuation Funds and Retirement Schemes Registration, Licensing and Reporting Amendment Regulations 2026 Resolution. Whereas Section 58(1) of the Pension Superannuation Funds and Retirement Schemes Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the Financial Services Commission may, with the approval of the Minister, make regulations for such matters as may be necessary or expedient for the purposes of the Act. And whereas on the 11th day of March 2026, the Financial Services Commission, with the approval of the Minister, made the Pension Superannuation Funds and Retirement Schemes Registration, Licensing and Reporting Amendment Regulations 2026. And whereas Section 58(2) of the Act provides that regulations made under Section 58(10) shall be subject to affirmative resolution. And whereas it is desirable that the Pension Superannuation Funds and Retirement Schemes Registration, Licensing and Reporting Amendment Regulations 2026 be affirmed. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Pension Superannuation Funds and Retirement Schemes Registration, Licensing and Reporting Amendment Regulations 2026 Resolution. And 2. the pension superannuation funds and retirement schemes, registration, licensing, and reporting amendment regulations 2026, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 27th day of March 2026, is hereby affirmed.
Thank you, Minister. Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Minister.
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of the bill and take it through all its concluding stages.
Members would have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I am pleased to present to this Honorable Senate today the bill cited as the Civil Aviation Amendment Act 2026. Jamaica is a contracting state to the Convention on International Civil Aviation, commonly known as the Chicago Convention. As such, Jamaica is required to implement and give effect to the Convention and its annexes, which contain the standards and recommended practices adopted by the International Civil Aviation Organization. The Civil Aviation Act 1966, as amended, is the principal legislative instrument that facilitates the implementation of Jamaica's international obligations under the Chicago Convention. As part of its oversight functions, ICAO periodically conducts audits of contracting states under its Universal Safety Oversight Audit Program to assess the extent to which contracting states like Jamaica have effectively established and implemented the requirements relating to aviation safety oversight. A review of Jamaica's civil aviation legislation was undertaken to determine the extent to which the applicable provisions of the Chicago Convention and SARPs are reflected in our domestic legal framework. And remember, SARPs are the standards and recommended practices. This review identified several areas requiring legislative amendments to ensure that Jamaica's civil aviation laws effectively support the discharge of its international obligations and align with current international civil aviation standards and best practices. So yes, it's a very long bill, but it's really about ensuring that our international obligations are met. So we're trying to align our standards with what obtains globally. So this bill proposes to amend the Civil Aviation Act, the Civil Aviation Regulations 2012, Regulation 3, and various provisions in the Civil Aviation Air Transport Licensing Regulations of 1966, the Civil Aviation Air Transport Licensing Board Delegation of Functions Order 1966, and the Civil Aviation Control of Airdromes and Airstrips Regulations of 1984. The proposed amendments are intended to enhance Jamaica's oversight of the aviation industry, support economic growth, and reduce the possibility for any adverse findings by ICAO for failing to apply updated standards in the civil aviation legislative framework. The bill therefore addresses identified legislative gaps and proposes amendments to the Act covering the following. So key areas that are being addressed. We're trying to strengthen Jamaica's legislative framework for aviation safety oversight, enhance the legal framework governing aircraft accident and incident investigations, facilitate the implementation of elements of the Chicago Convention concerning the transfer of certain functions and duties relating to interchanged, leased, and chartered aircraft, support the implementation of contemporary aviation safety management principles, provide the necessary legislative authority for consequential amendments to the Civil Aviation Regulations of 2012 and the Civil Aviation Air Transport Licensing Regulations 1966. We're also updating the monetary penalties contained in the Act, which have remained unchanged for a considerable period, to ensure they are proportionate to the seriousness of the offenses and support stronger regulatory compliance and enforcement in the interest of aviation and the flying public. We're also working to further align Jamaica's civil aviation legislation with ICAO requirements and international best practice. What happens if we're not in compliance? And these are rules that have been agreed globally, and Jamaica is a signatory to this, and so we have to comply, and we do, and there are periodic assessments done of Jamaica. So, Mr. President, the consequences of non-compliance with our international commitments would extend well beyond the aviation sector. A credible and internationally aligned safety oversight system is part of Jamaica's core economic infrastructure. Compliance underpins the confidence of airlines, passengers, insurers, aircraft lessors, investors, and partner regulators in Jamaica as a safe and reliable destination. If we want people to have confidence in our airspace and what we are doing in this country, it is important that we comply with the global rules. In 2024, Jamaica welcomed 4.5 million visitors to our country, including 2.9 million stopover visitors, and generated approximately 4.3 billion in tourism earnings. The stopover segment depends substantially on safe, reliable, and expanding air access. Any material erosion of confidence in Jamaica's aviation oversight system could therefore influence airline decisions on routes, frequency and future expansion, increased insurance, leasing and financing costs, and could weaken passenger and investor confidence. Even a modest reduction in airlift would be magnified many folds across our hotels or attractions, ground transportation, entertainment, agriculture, small businesses, everywhere. So other jurisdictions, Mr. President, have also will also apply their own safety assessment regimes. Under the United States Federal Aviation Administration system, a country that's found not to comply with ICAO oversight standards may be placed in Category 2, what they describe as Category 2. And carriers under that country's oversight may then be prevented from starting new services to the United States, expanding existing services, or entering new code-sharing arrangements. The European Union also may similarly impose operating restrictions or bans, and that is really what we're trying to prevent on the whole, because such consequences would constrain the future growth of Jamaican certified operators and diminish Jamaica's attractiveness as a location for aviation investment, aircraft operations, and regional connectivity. So, Mr. President, the cost of prevention is far lower than the cost of repairing a damaged safety reputation, restoring regulatory confidence, and having to rebuild lost airlift. So, Mr. President, before you, we have a very long bill, and the clause by clause is quite long. But I will go through it as quickly as I can so that you have an idea of what is being amended. So Clause 1 contains the name of the bill, which may be cited as the Civil Aviation Amendment Act 2026. The bill will amend Civil Aviation Act, the Principal Act, and it is to be read and construed as one with the Principal Act. Clause 2 provides for the amendment of the Principal Act to remove obsolete references and update terminology used throughout the Act. Clause 3 intends to amend the interpretation section of the Principal Act to modify and add definitions for key words and terms, and there are many words that are defined. Airdromes would be defined. They also defined aircraft, and this is expanded to include an unmanned aircraft. So we're talking about drones here, and that was an area that was missing. And so given where the world is changing and the importance of drones, that element has been added in, and there's a definition there in Clause 3. There are also other definitions such as surveillance, unmanned aircraft system is also included. Clause 2 is also amended to align terms and expressions in the Principal Act with terms and expressions in the Chicago Convention and annexes. It also is amending to ensure that our terms are consistent with ICAO, their standards too. There's a new Section 2A that empowers the minister by order to amend statutory definitions to maintain consistency with the Chicago Convention and its annexes. And I think I need to explain this. So every few months, there are new standards that come out. So they're constantly updating the standards. So you actually have to constantly be understanding what the standards are so that you can change them. And so what this is saying is, once the international body issues new standards, that the minister will be empowered by order to amend definitions to maintain consistency with the Chicago Convention and its annexes. In Section 2, it's about regulation of civil aviation in Jamaica. And Clause 5, an amendment of Section 3 of the Principal Act. This amendment expands the minister's regulation-making powers to provide for matters relating to aviation safety and security management systems. Also looks at reporting schemes in that. Aircraft interception procedures, aerial works, unmanned aircraft systems are also included. The amendment also increases the maximum monetary penalties applied for breaches of any regulations made. Clause 6 adds 3 new sections. There's a new Section 3A that provides authority for Jamaica to transfer specified aviation oversight functions to another contracting state in respect of Jamaican registered aircrafts operating under the agreement. The new Section 3B is intended to protect aviation safety and security data and information, and 3C looks at the circumstances under which aviation safety and security data may be made available. Clause 7, under Section 401, a penalty is assigned for the dangerous flying of an aircraft in a manner to cause danger or likely to cause danger to other persons, property, or other aircraft. By this clause, the penalty is being increased from a fine not exceeding $20,000, $20,000 would have been the penalty for dangerous flying of an aircraft, and that is being amended to a fine not exceeding $5 million on summary conviction before a parish court. The term of imprisonment of 3 years will remain unchanged. Clause 8. A new Section 4A is included to address failure to comply with aircraft interception procedures and directions. The new section creates offenses and penalties for failure to comply with aircraft interception procedures and directions. Clause 9. This amendment aims to revise key interpretations relating to aviation accident and incident, and distinguishes an accident from a serious incident or an incident. And if you want me to explain them, I can. The amendment will modernize accident investigation terminology and align the Principal Act with the related requirements under Annex 13 to the Chicago Convention. Clause 10. This clause clarifies that the purpose of an investigation of an aviation occurrence as being solely for preventative purposes and not to determine liability. Clause 11 inserts 2 new sections, 5AB and 5AC. These newly added sections seek to establish an accident investigation authority, and this is very much spelled out in the convention, to investigate an accident or serious incident. The accident investigation authority is intended to function as an independent body and will be established each time an aviation accident or serious incident occurs within the Kingston Flight Information Region. The constitution of the Accident Investigation Authority and the procedure for appointment of its members are included, and the Accident Investigation Authority will be given the same powers of a commission of inquiry on certain matters, to include the regulation of its proceedings and the summoning and examination of witnesses. Clause 12, this amendment establishes a board of inquiry that will be appointed by the minister to review the report of the Accident Investigation Authority in circumstances where the minister is dissatisfied with the findings of the Accident Investigation Authority or with the manner in which the investigation was conducted. So you have an escalation point there. Clause 13, the new section 5C provides for the appointment of an investigator in charge by the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority to investigate the circumstances of an aviation incident where such incident is not classified as a serious incident. So in terms of the serious incident versus an incident, so an incident could be a pilot coming in late at night, tired, and doesn't turn towards the gates at the point where it's supposed to turn, or saw the color of the lights not looking the same that he had expected. That's an incident, so no accident has occurred. But if you have cumulative actions like that, it could lead to an accident at some point. And so you have to investigate those, even though they may not qualify as a serious incident. And what the Act is doing is allowing for the appointment of an investigator in charge in those circumstances. Clause 14, repeal and replacement of Section 5D of the Principal Act. By the revised Section 5D, detailed provisions governing the appointment and participation of investigators, accredited representatives, and advisors in investigations are incorporated. In this regard, the Jamaica Aviation Authority will similarly appoint investigators to assist the investigator in charge in the conduct of an investigation. The subsections for Clause 15, the subsections are renumbered and additional subsections proposed to strengthen the Accident Investigation Authority by granting the Accident Investigation Authority unimpeded access to all evidence of an accident or serious incident, the authority to conduct detailed examination of all evidence, the power to require production of evidence relevant to the investigation where there are reasonable grounds to believe that such evidence is in a person's possession, custody, or controlled. The investigator in charge is empowered to prohibit or limit access to the area immediately surrounding the area where the evidence is located. The amendment also creates offenses for obstructing, delaying, or refusing to comply with lawful requests for evidence and introduces a penalty of a maximum fine of $2 million for committing any such offense and for willfully or knowingly entering the relevant area in contravention of a prohibition of access. Clause 16, the provision expands the categories of information on documents that may be required during an investigation. So this is bringing it up to modern times. The provision therefore seeks to replace the term on-board recording with more expansive terms. That is information, statement, transcript, or other document, so as not to limit investigative material to recordings only. A penalty of a fine not exceeding $2 million for failure to comply with a written request by the investigator in charge to produce a document is now being prescribed. Additionally, the amendment expands the categories of personnel protected under subsection 5 to include maintenance personnel and flight dispatchers. The contents of documents may not be used in disciplinary proceedings relating to their competence to perform their duties, not be used. I'm going to move on to Clause 18, which establishes procedures governing the collection, storage, and disposal of aircraft wreckage following investigations and recovery of associated expenses where applicable. The new Section 5HA mandates the operator or owner to collect the wreckage of an aircraft for disposal, describes the steps for collection, and so forth. And the new Section 5HB provides for recovery of the expenses incurred by the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority in effecting disposal of aircraft wreckage when the operator or owner fails to collect the wreckage. Clause 19. Section 51 of the Principal Act is repealed by Clause 19 of the bill as part of the restructuring of the accident investigation framework. Clause 20 expands the regulation-making powers of the minister with respect to the conduct of investigations of aviation accidents and incidents to include those occurring within the Kingston Flight Information Region. Clause 21, the new Section 5K seeks to prohibit disclosure of all information, communication, statements, transcript recording, data analysis, or other document disclosed during an investigation, and imposes a penalty of a fine not exceeding $1 million or imprisonment to a term not exceeding 1 year for non-compliance with this prohibition. Liability does not, however, arise where disclosure is required or necessary in prescribed circumstances, such as for the discharge of the person's official duties under the Principal Act or pursuant to a court order. Clause 22, getting there. At Section 6A1B, subparagraph 3, is amended to expand the area of safety and security oversight in respect of aerodromes under the remit of the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority to include, in addition to registration and certification, responsibilities for safety and security oversight for aerodromes, aerodrome operators, and aerodrome service providers. Clause 23 introduces a new provision to enable ministerial directions to be given to ensure discharge of or facilitate the discharge of an obligation binding on Jamaica. 24 updates provisions relating to prescribed rates and vests the minister with responsibility for the public service with the power to determine the prescribed rate at which employees of the Civil Aviation Authority are to be compensated. That's just aligning things with our current corporate governance standards where the Ministry of Finance is responsible for remuneration setting. Clause 25, this amendment established a comprehensive framework governing the grant, renewal, variation, suspension, and revocation of air service licenses, permits, and authorizations. Clause 26 amends Section 7 of the Principal Act to update the eligibility requirements for air service licenses and permits. Specifically, the amendment makes the granting of an air service license or permit by the authority permissible only with the consent of the minister if the person making the application is not a Jamaican citizen, a CARICOM member state, a national of a CARICOM member state, a body incorporated in Jamaica. So if it's a Jamaican, a national of a CARICOM member state, a body incorporated in Jamaica, the Civil Aviation Authority can issue its service licenses and permits. But if it's not, then they will do their assessment, but then the minister also has to approve. Clause 27. This provision inserts a new Section 7A to provide the authority with the legal framework by which it can transfer its functions or any part of its functions to another civil aviation authority. Also, with the approval of the minister, it could transfer its functions as a provider of air navigation services to a member or officer of the authority, and it can also transfer its function to deal with air service licenses and permits to a member or officer of the authority or any public officer with the approval of the minister. Clause 28, which is an amendment of Section 8 of the Principal Act. Section 8 of the Principal Act captures the regulation-making powers with respect to the licensing of air transport undertakings, and there are some new areas that have been included: the implementation of cooperative agreements for air transport, the protection of consumer rights, prescribing requirements for the lease or hire of aircraft, and the imposition of standards and requirements for insurance. Clause 29 updates and strengthens penalties applicable to offenses relating to the operation of air services and unauthorized disclosure. Clause 30 which amends Section 9A. So Section 9 is amended to expand the inspection and enforcement powers of the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority and its inspectors to include unmanned aircraft systems, aviation facilities, training organizations, operators, and aviation records. Clause 31 repeals and replaces Section 9B of the Principal Act, and this provision will have the effect of strengthening the right of inspectors to access aircraft and premises for inspection purposes. Clause 32, the introduction of new sections 9C, 9D, and 9E, which introduce provisions relating to the inspection of unmanned aircraft systems, inspection record keeping requirements, and offenses for obstructing inspectors. Clause 33 revises the penalties, and also Clause 34 strengthens penalties also. Clause 35, these provisions establish a framework for safeguarding aerodrome obstacle limitation areas, empowers the Civil Aviation Authority to direct the removal of unauthorized obstacles, and requires measures to address hazards posed by animals, inclusive of related offense and related penalty. Down to Clause 37, and that's an amendment of 12A of the Principal Act, penalty relating to the obstruction of authorized activities under Section 12A are updated to make provision for a fine not exceeding $2 million or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 1 year. So throughout, you see the penalties increasing. Section 14 sets out the provisions for trespassing on aerodromes, and Clause 39 expands provisions under Section 16D to include aviation security matters and updates the associated offense provisions. Clause 41, under this amendment, the application of the Act to state aircraft is clarified. The amendment empowers the minister to apply specified provisions by order where appropriate. And then in Clause 42, that's just extending provisions relating to aviation safety to expressly include aviation security and updates associated penalties. And then in Section 43, we see new penalties, and in Section 44, their amendment to Section 20 revises jurisdictional provisions and modernizes references to the courts. If I go to Clause 47, these new sections empower the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority, with the minister's approval, to amend the 5th schedule and confer a general regulation-making power on the minister to give full effect to the provisions of the Act. I should note, Mr. President, that in keeping with a recommendation from the opposition spokesperson in the House, the Ministry of Transport has asked that we bring further amendments to the bill. The new Section 28 speaks to a review from time to time by a committee of both houses of Parliament appointed for the purpose. And so that was a suggestion that had been made in the House by the spokesperson, and you will see that amended herein. Clause 48 updates the 3rd schedule to reflect the new accident investigation framework that we have, and Clause 49 proposes the insertion of the 5th schedule in the Principal Act, which includes a description of and a map delineating the Kingston Flight Information Region. And in the bill, there is an image in there that you can see that shows Jamaica, and it circles the area that's considered to be the Kingston Information Area. Yes, on page 58 of the bill. All right, trying to go through very quickly. Clause 50 makes consequential amendments to subsidiary legislation and related enactments to ensure consistency with the amendments introduced by the bill, including updated terminology, licensing provisions, penalties, regulatory powers, and administrative procedures. The relevant enactments amended by the bill are the Civil Aviation Regulation 2012, the Civil Aviation Air Transport Licensing Board Delegation of Functions Order 1966, the Civil Aviation Control of Aerodromes and Airstrips Regulations of 1984, the Civil Aviation Air Transport Licensing Regulations 1966. Mr. President, guess what? I'm at the end. Mr. President, these amendments are intended to ensure that Jamaica continues to maintain a robust and effective oversight system, fulfills its obligations as a responsible ICAO contracting state, and preserves confidence in the safety and regulatory framework governing civil aviation in Jamaica. The bill is therefore an important measure to support aviation safety, regulatory effectiveness, and Jamaica's continued compliance with international civil aviation standards. I therefore seek the approval of the members of this Honorable Senate for these amendments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bernard.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. At the outset, let me state clearly that the opposition supports the modernization of Jamaica's civil aviation legislative framework. Aviation, Mr. President, is one of the most heavily regulated sectors globally, and Jamaica's continued participation in international aviation requires compliance with the standards established under the Chicago Convention as outlined by the Minister. And we are well aware that failure to maintain compliance carries serious consequences. Hence, these legislative modernization are both necessary and desirable. Broadly, this bill introduces 5 major reforms: the establishment of a modern aviation safety framework, the creation of a statutory aircraft accident investigation regime, the regulation of unmanned aircraft systems, the introduction of new Article 83 arrangements, and the modernization of licensing and enforcement powers. Notwithstanding, Mr. President, there are some issues contained in the bill requiring greater scrutiny. Perhaps the most important issue in the bill concerns accident investigations. The legislation establishes an accident investigation authority responsible for investigating accident and serious incidents, and you would have heard the Minister's meticulous definition of both. However, several questions arise. Who appoints the investigators? The Minister appoints the investigators. Who publishes the notice? The Minister publishes the notice. Who appoints the Board of Inquiry? And you can guess, it's the Minister. So while operational independence is referenced, the institutional architecture remains heavily dependent on ministerial involvement. Mr. President, we must therefore examine whether sufficient safeguards exist to guarantee actual independence, particularly in politically sensitive investigations. In this regard, should the bill not consider, and I heard one amendment was accepted, requiring parliamentary reporting, annual public performance reports, fixed appointment criteria, and security of tenure for investigators. These considerations, Mr. President, would invariably go a far way in strengthening public confidence. Mr. President, the bill grants the minister significant authority to issue directions, approve transfers of regulatory responsibilities, amend the fifth schedule, establish arrangements under Article 83, and direct the authority in specific circumstances. The concern is not necessarily the existence of these powers. The concern is whether sufficient parliamentary oversight accompanies them. Would it not be prudent, therefore, Minister, that there are provisions made in the bill for the Article 18 arrangements to be tabled in the Parliament and for annual reports identifying and transferred responsibility be submitted to the Parliament? Again, Mr. President, we're talking about accountability, transparency, and confidence. The bill creates extensive protection around safety data, cockpit recordings, medical information, investigators' reports, records, and witness statements. While this is consistent with international standards, there are legitimate public interest concerns here, as excessive confidentiality can undermine transparency, particularly after aviation accidents or incidents involving fatalities, public infrastructure, national carriers, and state agencies. The question, therefore, are how the government will balance transparency, public accountability, and safety information. Will investigation reports be routinely published, Minister? Mr. President, the bill dramatically expands inspection powers. Inspectors may enter and inspect aircraft, drone facilities, aerodromes, maintenance organizations, training facilities, and operators' premises. These powers are understandable from a safety perspective. However, broad enforcement powers should be matched by safeguard. So will the minister say what appeal mechanisms exist for persons affected by regulatory actions, and how quickly can operators challenge adverse findings? Mr. President, you would have heard that throughout the bill, fines increase substantially. Imprisonment terms are extended and new offenses are created. The deterrent effect may be justified, but proportionality must remain a consideration, particularly for small operators, for drone users, aviation training providers, and maintenance firms. So, has the minister undertaken a regulatory impact assessment to determine the effect of these penalties? Mr. President, one notable omission is any meaningful discussion on cost. The amendments will require new investigative capabilities or capacities, new drone oversight systems, new safety management oversight, and again, the new Article 83 administration. Will the minister inform the Senate what is the estimated implementation cost? And has funding been allocated? And does the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority possess adequate staffing and technical resources? Mr. President, legislation alone does not produce compliance. Implementation does. The key question is whether the authority possesses the personnel, the technology, the budget required to execute these responsibilities. Internationally, the ICAO compliance failures often result not from weak laws, but from weak institutions. So additionally, therefore, can the minister indicate to the Senate the current staffing levels, vacancy rates, training plans, budget allocations, and implementation timelines? Mr. President, The Memorandum of Objects and Reasons present these amendments as necessary technical reforms intended to maintain Jamaica's compliance with international aviation standards. Implicit in that position is the assumption that the relevant technical stakeholders have been adequately consulted and broadly supportive of the legislative changes being proposed. Civil aviation, Mr. President, is a highly specialized sector, as mentioned before, in which safety outcomes depend not only on legislative compliance, but on the confidence, cooperation, and professional judgment of those personnel who are charged with implementing the law on a daily basis. In this regard, Mr. President, I believe it's important for the Minister to place on record whether the relevant stakeholders who were consulted are fully supportive of the provisions contained in the bill. So can the Minister therefore inform the Senate if the relevant stakeholders, particularly the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority and the Jamaica Air Traffic Controllers Association, were consulted during the development of these amendments? If so, did they get a chance to review the legislative proposal now before the Parliament? If the organizations are in full agreement with the changes being introduced, if there were disagreements or reservation, do you care to share those? And has the Minister addressed any concerns that were raised in these consultative stages? Mr. President, again, this bill is largely a technical modernization measure, and much of it reflects obligations of Jamaica because they have been accepted under international aviation laws. The opposition therefore approach the legislation constructively, but modernization must never be the substitute for accountability. As we strengthen aviation safety, we must also strengthen transparency. As we expand regulatory authority, we must preserve oversight. As we align international standards, we must ensure that the institutions responsible for enforcing these standards possess the independence, resources, and credibility necessary to discharge the functions effectively. The ultimate objective is not merely compliance with the International Civil Aviation Organization requirements. It is the creation of a safer, more transparent, more accountable aviation system that protects passengers, operators, workers, and the Jamaican public alike. For those reasons, while supporting the broad objectives of the bill, the opposition believes concerns raised today deserves careful consideration before the legislation completes its passage through the Honourable Senate. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bernard. Senator Gale.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, President, this is a very, very important piece of legislation. And I want to thank the Minister for how she took us through it. You know, within reasonable time, without any turbulence. In my mind, I am considering this bill as a safety bill. It's very important for the aviation industry. And Senator Bernard would have raised some concerns about consultation. And I have no difficulty with consultation. The important thing is, when does consultation take place? And in my mind, consultation is always going to be viewed as a journey. Because you might consult today
and find that when you evaluate, it requires further consultation. Now, the objective of this bill is to form some sort of alliance with the convention itself. And this bill is one, given the industry in how it operates requires alliance. You have country-to-country alliance. You have airlines forming alliance. The intention is that we must all be doing the same thing for the safety of the industry.
You hear that, sir?
And I want to use the opportunity, President, to commend all the workers who operate in this industry.
Here.
Senator Floyd Morris, you travel very often, frequent mileage, a frequent flyer. And, and very far, going through many ports. Now, in this case, your concern for safety starts with the customer service agent who checks you in, those who collect your bags and ensure that your bag gets onto the aircraft, those who are the ground handlers who ensure the aircraft is parked and pushed back and ensure that it's taken off, those who work in the tower, the cabin crew, the maintenance, the cockpit crew, everybody plays a fundamental role, and the security personnel, everybody plays a fundamental role. And this is the kind of alliance. So, President, what we are trying to do is to strengthen our international compliance. We don't want any adverse audits. We don't want any restrictions from international aviation operations. We don't want a reduced confidence among international carriers. And, certainly, we don't want any negative impact on our tourism investment. So, President, what we are seeking to do is to enhance our aviation safety. And I want to commend the government for bringing this legislation to the table. Because it's about accountability, the reporting mechanisms, the regulatory oversight that is required. And in essence, what this would be doing is that it is supporting our industry growth, our connections with airlines, or with investors, with international aviation partners. And so, President, this kind of legislation is one that is seeking to build public confidence and international confidence. People must know that we are preparing to have legislations in an important industry, and we are up to the standards of scrutiny. So, President, there are policy considerations that is driving these changes. One of them that comes to my mind is the question of the technological transformation. Now, the aviation sector is experiencing, President, rapid technological changes. We talk about artificial intelligence, advanced flight management systems, automation, surveillance systems, and all of that is taking place, and Jamaica has to position itself to be in alliance with the international norms. But, I want to use the opportunity to raise today the intervention of AI, because AI, in my mind, is not to override and to take away the element of the worker. So the human element must remain central. There are technology, there are procedures, but when it comes to safety and security, you have to have the human element as part of that. The experience has to be there. The judgment of the human element has to be there. You know, some time ago, there was a glitch in the international airspace in Europe. And for about 3 hours, flights were canceled all across Europe. It was fixed within the 3 hours. The worker who fixed it, incidentally, was working remotely and couldn't fix it remotely. And he had to find himself to Heathrow. It took him 2 hours based on where he was. And he came and he fixed it. It tells you that you cannot deal in this industry without the human element. And so we have to be cautious about the use of AI as it relates to certain industry. And that AI must not be viewed as the overriding factor. The human element has to be there because we have to talk about air traffic management support, the risk identified, and even maintenance planning. What I want to encourage is that in this case, where we are going through these transitions and the compliance with these standards, there has to be continuous training and development of the competencies of our employees to know where we are going and to be in alliance. And the consultation that you speak about is critical, but it has to be ongoing. It can't be in the first stage before we need to implement a legislation or enact a legislation. But as the legislation goes through its passages or the phases of implementation, there has to be a kind of evaluation to see where we are and what we're doing. Now, I am happy of Clause 11, the establishment of the Accident Investigation Authority. And I note the use of the terms accident investigation, serious incident investigation, and even incident investigation. Because the incidents are the near miss. But that too ought to be investigated. And what is important is that there's a level of independence in terms of the accident investigations or the incident investigations. There's also the question of the regulatory oversight in this. So the accident investigation, President, deals with determining the cause of the accident. It also identifies what are those contributing factors. And out of that, it makes recommendations that there is no future occurrence, because that's what you want to mitigate against. But there's the importance of that institutional separation between the oversight, you have the investigator in charge, but you also have that kind of appeal process that promotes the level of credibility. Now, it's important that as we go along, these separations of powers are identified and determined so that you know who is doing what and where the steps that needs to be taken. One of the things is that we really don't want to have an accident. And we want to be able to identify the causes for the incidents, whether they are just mere incidents or they are serious incidents. Because let's accept it. The serious incidents could have led to an accident. And we need to do the kind of investigation that are going to make recommendative changes so that we mitigate against the accidents. Because that's what we don't want. We cannot afford, as an industry operating here in Jamaica, whether it is Norman Manley, whether it is Sangster, whether it is Ian Fleming, whether it is going to be the new Vernon Field, or the Negril, wherever it is, we don't want to have an accident. And so, that is what the intention and the objective of this bill is seeking to pursue. Now, President, I was seeking a question of clarity in my mind in clause 21. They prohibit disclosure, and subsection 2 speaks to subject to subsection 4. Every person who had an official duty or was employed to the authority or in relation to the accident investigation or an investigator in charge appointed under section 5C shall maintain after such duty of employment was terminated the secrecy and confidentiality of all information or any document relating to the execution of or to exercise or the exercise of functions under this act. Now, there's the importance of confidentiality. Sensitive safety information, you could have had witness statements, the technical evidence, operational records. Now, in my mind, every termination results in a separation. But not every separation is necessarily viewed as a termination initiated by the employer. In this case, I'm just wondering if the intention really is the termination to hold secrecy, or is it separation? I'm just seeking clarity in terms of the intention and the use of the term termination as opposed to separation. Because the objective really is that you want to prohibit the disclosure of sensitive information, whether the sensitive information comes out of the technical evidence provided or the operational record, but the individual in this case, for whatever the reason, would have been separated. And so, the intention has to be protected. So I'm asking some clarity on it, Minister, because I think it's important. You know, there's the question of retirement, resignations, expiration of contract. You may be even seconded to another agency or authority, or having temporary assignment. So this bill, in my mind, is very, very important. It strengthens our compliance with international standards. It is seeking, President, to enhance aviation safety. Once we do this, we are supporting industry growth, and we are improving public confidence. The public wants to know that we are operating in a space that is safe and secure. And critical in this bill was the establishment of that independent accident investigation framework. So, as legislators, there has to be an alliance, a coordinated effort between us as legislators, those who make policies, the employers, the worker representative that Senator Bernard, you may not have spoken about them, but I understand in terms of the consultations, you spoke about some unions and some associations. What we're seeking to promote is, once we pursue this kind of legislative framework, we must operate with what I call a just transition. That it's seamless, it's technical, but we have to be creative. And with those observations, Mr. President, I support the objectives of this bill, and I commend my colleagues in the Senate to form alliance in the support of this legislation. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Gale. Senator Brown. Senator Gale, give me a minute, please. Senator Brown.
Mr. President, I want to start my comment on this bill by expressing my condolences to the people of Venezuela who have suffered from the impact of the earthquake yesterday. Scores have died. I remember when we had Melissa, Venezuela was the first to offer assistance. I note that the government and the opposition have both come out in support of the people of Venezuela and express a readiness to assist. And it's important because while we're talking civil aviation, and we can see the potential of a crash, an earthquake will come even if we have no civil aviation rules. So maybe, like the lesson from Haiti, we as Jamaicans can also take into account that it's not just the hurricane season we face, but we're constantly in the threat of earthquake. So to the people of Venezuela, I express on behalf of the entire Senate of Jamaica our sympathy and condolences. We hope that we can assist, even in the smallest way, in their recovery. In terms of this bill, let me start with a very simple issue, Minister. The word drones has come up, and in the definition it talks about unmanned aircraft. But for the people out there, they don't know whether or not they're flying a drone to take pictures at a wedding or at a funeral or some event, or some person using drones for commercial purposes are impacted by this legislation, especially if they're not near to the air routes and so forth. So maybe your team could address that issue and give confidence to the people out there who may be concerned about the little drones that they have and how it impacts. And especially since the events post-February 28th has shown the power of drones. That a small country with the appropriate drone technology can defeat an evil empire. That a country with drones can defeat an evil empire. I say that because the reality is, that's what I'm talking about. The reality is that those who think they are so powerful to dictate to small countries must know that when small countries develop their own creativity, their own resilience, they can win the battles and win even the war. And it's important for us to recognize that. Senator Gale, when I saw this bill, I, like you, thought safety as an important factor of it. When I combine the desire for safety with what the minister said and what you also said, the importance of this bill to the traveling public. Minister, I believe you said something like 4.5 million visitors come to Jamaica. And the emphasis for me is on the visitors, foreigners, coming to and passing through Jamaica. Coming to and passing through Jamaica, foreigners. And I therefore said to myself, this is an interesting rush by the government to deal with the issue of safety predominantly for foreigners. Yes, Jamaicans will benefit from all the safety measures of the Chicago Convention. And it is safety center gear for workers. It's safety for workers at the airport too. But what bothers me, Minister, is that the safety of Jamaican workers, whether at the airport, whether at Water Commission, whether at JPS, whether in agriculture, wherever those workers may be, at Solid Waste Management Authority, at the flour mill, at the cement company, in the hospitals, the importance of safety for Jamaican workers need the same attention as this bill, which essentially gives safety to more foreigners than Jamaicans. And so, in my first term, when I sat on that side, the government brought to Parliament the Occupational Safety and Health Bill. It went through a Joint Select Committee. Your government came in 2016, and for 10 years, the Occupational Health and Safety Bill have not come to the Parliament for debate and implementation. The Chicago Convention is a convention of 1944. The law that don't go there, come on. Skeffrey and you and I sat good. Yeah, in a committee that was in my government. That is correct. When I was on that side, we had a Joint Select Committee. But suffice it to say, that the Chicago Convention is a 1944 convention. The law that governs safety at the workplace in Jamaica is a 1943 legislation, the Factories Act, with its regulation of 1961, and a slight amendment in 2009. It is past time for this legislation, the OSHA bill, which I fondly describe as being starting as a wristwatch and is now
There's a point of order on the floor, Senator Brown. Senator Golden Campbell.
Mr. President, I suspect I share the sentiment of my colleague, Senator Lambert Brown, in regards to the bill he's referencing. But on a point of order, it is not relevant to the debate that we are having today. And while he very skillfully weaves words that are part of the bill's name into his speech, the content of his speech is not relevant. And he's very skillful at it, actually. I admire his skill at it. But it's not relevant. So can we move on to the matters that concern the bill before us?
Thank you very much, Senator Golden Campbell. Of course, you're perfectly right. But Senator Brown knows it, and he's going to wrap up shortly, I take it.
President, when Senator Gale said this is a safety bill, It was okay. No point of order. Correct, it is.
But
and all
hello,
I'm saying
Senator
is
Brown.
that aviation safety is not more important to me than the safety of the worker at the National Solid Waste Management Authority.
Fantastic. So let's
or the
move
Water
on.
Commission.
So move on from
or
that.
any
then.
other workplace in Jamaica.
Yeah.
So I'm simply saying, having regard for the Minister of Labour announcing this year that the OSHA bill is ready, I believe it's time.
Senator Brown, just deal with this legislation,
This is what
please.
I'm saying, that this bill could benefit from a companion legislation. This bill could benefit from a companion legislation dealing with safety for workers, not who fly, only who fly, but across the board in the country. And so those who believe that I shouldn't get up and talk about safety for Jamaican workers, but that they must recognize that I come here hoping that there can be bipartisan support for the Occupational Safety and Health Bill, and that this be brought, because this bill is going back to the other place, because there are amendments to come. And I hope the other place will see the importance of urging on the Minister of Labour to speedily lay the Occupational Health and Safety Act.
Thank you.
I move on from that call for the Occupational Health and Safety Act to be brought to the Parliament as a matter of urgency by saying, what this government, you want me to talk about this bill? This bill to me appears to be preference for foreigners. It's the same approach.
But Senator Brown,
It's
with the
the
greatest of respect, how can civil
That's
aviation...
my opinion.
I'm asking though.
Well,
how
let me
can
speak
civil
and then we can
aviation
talk
safety,
afterwards.
how can civil aviation
Let me talk
safety
about-
be aimed at foreigners?
Let
Where you
me
getting
talk
that- where you
what
get
I
this
want
thing
to
from?
talk. You can come into the debate if you want. The reality is that just like the TCN, a preference to foreigners over the Melissa victims, just like the preference, the rejection of Jamaican coming back from the UK, we are seeing a government showing a preference to foreigners over Jamaican. I choose Jamaica. For you, choose Jamaica is a slogan. For you, choosing Jamaica is a slogan. For me, it's reality. I raise the issue. Why are you bringing to Jamaica the most despicable pedophiles and dangerous people that
Senator
your
Brown.
MOU
Senator
has
Brown.
brought?
Senator Brown, I have to turn off your mic. You heard what you said? Why is the government of Jamaica choosing to bring Rubio's pedophile and despicable people? That is the position of the People's National Party. That is the position of the People's National Party. Well, if that is the position, I want you to state on the record that that is the position of the People's National Party. That the Jamaica Labour Party government is bowing to Rubio to bring pedophiles and criminals to Jamaica. Let the record show that that is the position of the People's National Party. Please have your seat. Anybody, Minister, anything else? No, I'm not turning it on. Look here now, I just want the record to indicate, that Senator Brown, speaking on behalf of the People's National Party, is saying that the government of Jamaica is choosing Rubio's Secretary of State of the United States of America is choosing to bring Rubio's pedophile criminal and rapist to Jamaica. That is the position of the People's National Party. Look here, man, don't start me today at all. Senator Gale. Afraid of who, me? All right, repeat it. Let me turn on your mic.
That's what I want to know.
Repeat it.
I am saying here.
Repeat it.
That in choosing to bring the TCN,
yes,
you are choosing what Rubio said. Despicable pedophiles who they want to get away from America.
All right, okay.
And to dump on us.
And that's the position of the People's National Party.
Brown's view.
Senator Sinclair. You finish? You finish? I am. Yes, I'm telling you that you finish. I am. No, I'm not preventing you to speak on the bill. You are speaking on the bill, and you go a point where you're talking about Senator Rubio and all manners of extraneous things. So therefore, I'm saying no problem. Senator Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
We don't reach a point in the Senate where a senator is not allowed to complete his speech when he's speaking on the bill. Because what he says is offensive to our government policy, which puts foreigners over
it has nothing to do with offending anybody. It has to do with offending the standing order. Senator Sinclair.
Mr. President, thank you very much. And I hope that my few words that I will make in respect to this bill will bring back some sanity having regard to the outburst that was just seen by Senator Lambert Brown. Unfortunate, because he's one of the more long-serving senators in this Senate and should be familiar with the standing orders to know that the president can cause a senator to discontinue his presentations for being repetitious and for being irrelevant. That is your authority as the president of the Senate. But Mr. President, I stand in support of this bill, which is entitled An Act to Amend the Civil Aviation Act. And why I must make my few comments is that I am from a parish, Mr. President, parish of St. James, which is the home for the Sangster International Airport. Sangster International Airport, which is what we can describe as Jamaica's premier tourism gateway, the Sangster International Airport is. And I must commend the operators of the Sangster International Airport for ensuring, and the government, airports authority, all the stakeholders that participate in making that airport being the premier tourism gateway to Jamaica. Mr. President, not only Jamaica, but when you look on the international awards that have come to the Sangster International Airport year after year after year, it is something that we must be pleased about. Mr. President, Jamaica's aviation history has been, I would want to say, much better than many other places across the world. We have not had any reported major accidents in Jamaica, and we have not had reported any major incidents. Not to say that there have not been incidents which are of concern, but not one which has caused us to feel that our aviation industry is one that is not relatively safe compared to other places. And so, Mr. President, this bill coming at this time to ensure that we are in full compliance with what is contained in an international convention which has been in place from 1944 is something that I would say is timely. It is long in coming, having regard to the fact that we are seeking to become fully compliant with a convention that has been around from 1944. But guess what? Better late than never. And so I believe that it is timely. And we must recognize, Mr. President, the work that has been done primarily at Sangster International Airport, but also to be done at Norman Manley International Airport in respect to improving the safety standards at those airports. And I'll just highlight a few of them that have occurred between 2016 to current. So we have seen the runway extension project, Mr. President, that is primarily aimed at improving the safety standards and accommodating larger aircraft, enhancing operational efficiency. Mr. President, at the Sangster International Airport, they have already completed the extension of the runway by 3,060 meters, Mr. President, bringing it in compliance with the highest international aviation standards, the extension of the runway at the Sangster International Airport. And in addition to that, at the end of either end of the runways, Mr. President, oh boy, Lambert, you know, sometimes I think you should be calm sometimes.
Senator Brown,
Mr. President,
Senator Brown,
the runway,
Senator Brown, calm down now, man. Calm down, man. Yes, man, calm quietly too. And allow the proceedings of the Senate to take place.
Mr. President, the runway and safety areas at both ends of the runway of the Sangster International Airport has been improved. The lighting for aircraft coming into and out of the airport at Sangster International Airport has been improved. The terminal modernization, which facilitates the improved passenger processing, the security screenings, Mr. President, and improvement in the road networks on the land side for persons who use the facility at the Sangster International Airport are significant improvements that have been done since 2016 for improving the safety requirements at the airport. And what I want to also pronounce on is the investment that has been made in the solar energy infrastructure to reduce the dependence on the national grid and lower the carbon footprint. Significant improvements that have been made there. And the taxiways, another safety requirement. The aprons have been improved and able to handle in a safe way the increased levels of aircraft traffic that we have coming into Sangster International Airport. So between that time and now, so this bill coming as a legislative framework for continuing safety standard improvements is something that must be recognized because we know that our airports are critical, Mr. President, to tourism, international trade, business investment, cargo transportation, and employment opportunities that exist at those facilities. And you know, I just want to remind us what can happen if we don't take these steps as are required. And as it is well known that Jamaica is subject to an audit at any time by the international bodies to ensure that we have the safety standards where we are. Because, Mr. President, if you were to look back in history a little bit, and you don't have to go too far back, what happened in 1995 when we were downgraded from Category 1 to Category 2, and the impact that it had in respect to travel. We're an island state, and to move in and out, whether it is for tourists, whether it's for locals, we're going to have to either take a plane or we're going to take a boat. And what is the most popular means of travel? Aircraft. That is the fastest means of travel that we have into and out of the country. But, Mr. President, when we were downgraded in 1995 because of what were safety issues, there's a report that was published which said that And at the time, it was Gordon Butch Stewart who operated Air Jamaica. Mr. President, the report says, the Gordon Butch Stewart-led airline has sustained heavy losses after being forced to keep a newly acquired 218-seater A310 parked because the United States Federal Aviation Authority has rated Jamaica Category 2 in terms of its observance of aviation standards. So, Mr. President, if we don't do these things and do it in a timely fashion and ensure that we meet the standards that are required by these international conventions, we stand to lose tremendously in respect to travel, in respect to business, in reputation, which can last for a long time, in respect to employment opportunities, Mr. President. And it's not employment opportunities that we are speaking about just happening within the airport region, but it is far and wide beyond that. Because if our visitors who come here primarily by aircraft don't have the ability to travel to Jamaica, then the tourism sector is going to be severely impacted. What we do to our farmers who want to get out their produce will be tremendously impacted. So what we are doing here, Mr. President, is to ensure that we don't get back to a situation that existed for 3 years under previous administration, between 1995 and 1997, when we were downgraded. And what I want to say to all of us, we must consider what is required internationally by these conventions and by the legislation. I heard the inquiry being made across the floor as to whether drones are included in unmanned aircraft. Obviously. And you know, some persons, Mr. President, seem to act a little reckless. At times. Because for their own, whether it is for enjoyment, whether it is for their business opportunity, they operate these aircraft in certain restricted areas. This has to be controlled, Mr. President. Mr. President, in Montego Bay, I do recall that even Kent Avenue, which poses a threat, Kent Avenue, that ran behind the Sangster International Airport, we had to suffer the inconvenience, as one would believe. It was the shortest route to a particular community, White House community from downtown Montego Bay, but we had to have that particular area closed in order to ensure that safety standards were met. And in respect to even building compliance, Mr. President, I say to our Jamaican people that you may want to have the benefit of expanding your construction, your development. You want to put on a 2 and 3 floors because what is operating in your mind is to say that I want to secure my pension through the ability to rent. But we cannot just be so selfish. We have to ensure that what is required as building conditions close in proximity to the airport that can impact upon the incoming or outgoing aircraft, that those standards are also met. And we have had situations like that in Montego Bay. When I was sitting in the capacity as mayor of Montego Bay, we had to deal with a particular development that had gone beyond what was required by the Civil Aviation Authority in respect to height. And with the expansion of the airport, there is now a large parcel of land that there are severe restrictions that will have to be put in place in respect to any type of development that takes place in that particular zone. So not only does the Parliament have to pass the legislation, the people who live within Jamaica, Jamaicans on a whole, will have to appreciate that they too can participate in safety requirements for incoming and outgoing aircraft. We have heard stories, not only here locally, but abroad, persons using, the little lights that beam the high-intensity lights. LED lights, eh? Yes. Laser lights. The laser lights. Those are things that we find as being amusing and we do it for enjoyment and so forth. But the impact that it can have in respect to safety issues for incoming and outgoing aircraft are things that we must consider. So, Mr. President, safety, I believe, is the buzzword as contained in this particular bit of legislation, in this bill. And for that reason, having regard to the potential impact or negative impact that it can have if we do not pass this legislation and pass it now and to have full compliance with it, put in what it is needed in order to improve the institutions that have to ensure compliance with this bit of legislation. I stand in full support of it and any operational and implementation activities that have to be done to ensure that Jamaica maintains its standard in respect to aviation, safety, and security. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Sinclair, thank you, Minister.
Mr. President, I thank my colleagues for their interventions. I never expected it to be this spirited of a debate on the civil aviation bill and the amendments, but thank you for having read it and raising your questions. I will start with the opposition response, and I thank you for the questions that were posed. In terms of the question around who appoints the investigators, the Board of Inquiry, and there are a lot of discussions about ministerial powers that are there. I always remind people when they talk about ministerial powers that ministers have real roles, and they're important roles, and the government of the day is in fact elected to do work, and some of these powers relate to being a minister. And if we look at your particular questions, you were talking about the investigators and their appointment, and I want to take you to section 11.3 in the bill, and when you get there, you can see, for example, the Accident Investigation Authority shall consist of such number of persons appointed by the minister in writing as follows. And it outlines and it talks about at E, for example, an expert in the area relevant to the investigation of the accident or serious incident. Any person, or at F, any person or persons with relevant qualifications or expertise as necessary having regard to the circumstances of the accident or serious incident. So yes, the minister has powers to appoint, but there are guardrails there. And if you go to 11.4, the minister shall not appoint a person to be a member of the Accident Investigation Authority in a capacity referred to in subsection 3 before, unless he is satisfied that the person has the relevant qualifications, experience, and expertise. So it's not arbitrary. There are guardrails there, and there are important guardrails that are there. There were some questions about confidentiality, and that's always a balancing act. You want to have confidentiality as you're doing an investigation. You don't want everything out there. Because a lot of times when you're doing an investigation, something may arise and you have a piece of information that may seem consequential, but by the end it's not. So confidentiality is actually a feature of accident investigations around the world. This is not unique to Jamaica. And remember, we're amending in relation to what obtains globally. There was a question about the appeal mechanisms and how do you appeal. If we go back to the Principal Act, in the Principal Act there's a section 25 that speaks to persons aggrieved by anything that comes out of the Civil Aviation Authority. And in this bill also, it speaks to the fact that if the minister is not satisfied with a report, and usually that will come from individuals noting their dissatisfaction, that you can have a subsequent committee that is established to look back at the accident. So there are mechanisms in there in relation to someone who feels they're aggrieved, both in this bill and also in the principal legislation at section 25. There was a discussion about new offenses and fines, and I think that point that you make is very, very important in terms of how do we sensitize Jamaicans around this, because there's some new significant fines in there and some new significant offenses. So I agree with you that public education is going to have to be a big part of the next steps in relation to this bill. In terms of implementation costs, the Civil Aviation Authority is pretty clear that they have enough revenue in order to treat with this, and it's not really changing much. And remember that the Accident Investigation Authority is ad hoc, so it's not there permanent, and that was actually something in the Legislative Committee that we were speaking through. Does it have to be there all the time? Because what would it do when there is no accident? And so we agreed from a policy standpoint that it would be ad hoc, and so at that point, the Minister of Finance would fund those activities. And remember, the global standard is that it has to be independent of the Civil Aviation Authority, so they can't even pay the members that are appointed there. And so if that does happen, we have mechanisms in place, and we've already discussed how that will take place. The agency, as I said, you asked about staffing and vacancies. This would not affect that, but they obviously will be ramping up their own training for their staff. In terms of Senator Gale, thank you for your support for the bill, and you brought up some good points in relation to consultation and when consultation is needed and not needed, and I appreciate that, so I won't repeat it. You spoke about confidentiality and the use of the term termination, and whether or not that was constricting and if it should not be broadened. And we've discussed that with the team here and the legal team here, and that is something that they will be looking at making some adjustments to in the future, just to make it a little bit more clear. All right. In terms of Senator Brown, I will stick to what you spoke about in relation to the bill. In terms of drones, you spoke about drones, and drones are those unmanned systems. And I just wanted to note, Senator, it's going to be an area, again, that we're going to need to do public education on. And the good thing is that we're not starting from scratch. If you go on the Civil Aviation's website, you will see that they have some guidance in relation to these drones and unmanned systems. And if you go into the area for hobbyists, it gives you some really good guidelines that are there. You have, that an unmanned aircraft shall not be operated at a height exceeding 400 feet beyond a maximum range of, and it gives you all of that information there. So they have guidance. And there's also guidance for commercial operators, because as you know, we're using drones more in agriculture. And at Heart in particular, we are training our young agricultural scientists to use drones, and our young farmers to use drones in order to surveil their properties, look for disease, and also even in terms of administering pesticides. So it is something that we are actively teaching, and so we're seeing it being used more and more, but there has to be guidance. But right now, what they have is really guidance. It's not grounded in any kind of legislative framework, so their ability to enforce is limited. So what this bill is doing is actually creating a framework that speaks to these drones, for example, and that will provide regulations that can regulate them now that they're actually named in the bill. No. There are going to be regulations in relation to the unmanned systems. So that's going to be done. And so there is guidance, so don't worry, there is guidance there already, and there will be continued work that will be done. I should note too on that matter of the unmanned systems, they're going to be doing consultations with varying industries like national security, tourism, and other industry players because they are going to obviously be affected there. This is an issue we have to really look at. There are incidents now of drones in highly sensitive areas that we suspect are being used for criminal activity. And we have to be very mindful of them. And this is one bill that is actually starting to understand the power of drones. And I think other pieces of legislation are also going to have to contend with that. Senator Sinclair, I thank you too for your thoughts on what's happening and how much work is being done. Especially you brought up what's happening at Sangster International Airport and a lot of the advances there. And I thank you also for placing on record the risk of reputational damage if anything were to happen in this country. And I think we should, I know Senator Brown brought up the workers, and our workers in the civil aviation area have been amazing. We've had some incidents in Jamaica, but we have maintained very high standards. And so I salute all those workers who work diligently, even without the law. They're already where we need to be, and I applaud those workers. In closing, I should note, Mr. President, that there were, I'm going to get the number for you, in around 2016, around 10 years ago, the organization had 12,000 standards. That's in the Chicago Convention, the annexes. 12,000 standards in 2016. Now, there are over 19,000 standards. So 7,000 odd new standards in that 10-year period. And the convention has 19 annexes to it. So it's a lot of change that's taking place in civil aviation. What you have here today, these amendments, will make us fully compliant with safety and accident elements. It's not everything. So we're now fully compliant on Annex 13, 19, and parts of 17. What it means is that we're going to continue to be discussing this piece of legislation, the Principal Act and amendments, because we have other areas of amendment that have to come. And the team has already started working on that, so that we're fully aligned with all 19 annexes. So in short order, you'll see another list of amendments that will come. It will include some of the things that would have been discussed and also look at new areas. And so, Mr. President, in the interest of time, I ask that the bill be read a second time.
Members would have heard the question. Those in favor? Aye. Against?
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Civil Aviation Act read a second time.
The Senate will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause. I have some agreement with members concerning how we can proceed. Can I take clauses 1 to 10? Those in favor? Against? Ayes have it. I think the minister is going to address that.
Sure. Those amendments that you would have seen, because another set of amendments is coming, we will just add them into that set of amendments that will come. But we'll move with the bill as is for today.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wonder if it was a COVID or some flu. Yeah. The government had circulated, or the parliament had circulated some amendments. You're saying that those amendments are not going to come today, but we're going to go with the bill as passed, even though when you spoke, you said that there's a particular amendment that the minister had authorized you to accept today. That's not going to be accepted today, is what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that that's really an indication of the fact that they are listening to us. And so the point that was raised by also Senator Gale has been accepted, and there are other amendments coming. As I said, it's 19,000 regulations that we have to get on board. We're coming back with more, and so we will just include those in the next
these will come
amendments.
before the OSHA bill or after the OSHA bill?
One to 10. Those in favor? Aye. Against? I put clauses 11 to 20. Those in favor? Aye. Against? I put clauses, yes, I did say against. I put clauses 21 to 30. Those in favor? Aye. Against? I put clauses 31 to 37. Those in favor? Aye. Against? I put clauses 38 to 47. Those in favor? Aye. Against? Let's have it. I put 48 to 50. Those in favor? Aye. Against? I put the schedule and title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Aye. Against? The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Aye. Against? Thank you, Marshall. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister?
Mr. President, I ask that the bill be read a third time.
Members would have heard the question, specifically that the bill be read for a third time. Those in favor? Against? Mr. Clark?
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Civil Aviation Act read a third time and passed.
Minister, I believe that you wanted a recommittal of item notice of motions given orally.
Yes, I do. Mr. President, I beg to give notice at the next meeting of the Senate.
1 minute. So you're asking for notices of motions to be recommitted. The question is that the item notices of motions given orally be recommitted. Those in favor? Against? So we are at notices of motions given orally. Minister?
I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the insurance amendment of 20th Schedule Number 2 Regulations 2026, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 26th day of June 2026, be referred to the Regulations Committee of the Senate for consideration and report. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Thank you very much. So we are back. Public business.
Mr. President, I now ask that the motion, notice of which I gave, he's to do something. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
The question is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the minister to take the motion, notice of which she gave earlier. Those in favor? Against?
Mr. President, I now ask that the motion, notice of which I gave earlier, be approved.
Members would have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? Ayes have it. Thank you. Minister? Minister?
Sorry. Mr. President, I think we do not plan to do any more business today. It's 12:37, which is a good time for us to close off. And so, Mr. President asks that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Members would have heard the question that the Senate be adjourned to a date to be fixed. Those in favor? This Honorable Senate now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Every act of kindness, every step towards understanding brings us closer to a brighter tomorrow. Let's choose unity, compassion, and hope. Together, we can build a future where peace reigns.
Brighter tomorrow starting today.
Jamaica's first broadcast museum is completely online. The PBCJ Audio Visual Library AVL website houses a curated collection of exhibits ranging from our island nation's